This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. Bill Slavicsek might be one of the most fascinating people in Star Wars publishing history. And I know you may not have heard of him by name. You will know him very well after this interview. But you've probably heard of West End Games and the influence that they had over a lot of Star Wars lore that exists because of the work that they did. Defining a Galaxy is the book that kind of dives into how all of this happened, and I finally read it, and I'm finally talking to the author about it. I hope you enjoy. Let's give a little context for how much Star Wars means to you, because for those who don't know, and for those who haven't read Defining a Galaxy yet, which after this, I definitely hope they do. I'm a little late to it. That's okay. You're never late to a book. It's there. It always exists. So you were there when Star Wars came out in 77. You saw it over 30 times. Star Wars is a huge part of your life. And I'll just say, growing up, my dad always said, he saw Star Wars when it came out 11 times. And I always thought, like, oh my God, that's so amazing that he saw it 11 times. And I kid you not, I was reading your book and you were like, well, I saw it 38 times. And I was like, Dad, I love you, but your 11 times is no longer impressive to me. You have competition. So Star Wars has meant a lot to you for a very long time. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about how, kind of what it felt like when you first started kind of slowly working on Star Wars material, because it kind of just like it was a right place, right time kind of situation where you happened to be working at West End. They happened to get the Star Wars license, and all of a sudden you were working on things, which was very cool. Did you ever have a moment, or what was that moment of like that it finally hit you that you were kind of in a way contributing to Star Wars, a thing that you already loved so much?
Yeah, so just to go back to 77, I mean, that was a very formative summer for me. In addition to Star Wars, which was amazing to experience the first time, it was so unlike anything prior to that in my young experience. From the moment the big ship, well, the letters going off into the distance, and then the big ship coming on, the Star Destroyer that went on forever and ever, and lightsabers, and everything was just amazing. Um, but also that summer was the summer I read Sword of Shannara. I was big into Stephen King at that point, who was still relatively new. And I found Dungeons and Dragons right around there as well. So basically everything, and I was a big Marvel Comics fan, so everything that later I worked on kind of culminated and coalesced that summer I didn't know that was my future,
Yeah.
but it kind of set it all up. Um, so you move a little 10 years into the future, 9 years into the future. I'm out of college. I did a year working on a weekly in Queens, the Queens Chronicle in New York, as the editor for that newspaper. And then if you've ever worked on a weekly, they basically you do a year and then it starts to repeat again because they tell the same stories in the communities over and over. And I started to get bored, so I went looking for a new job. And I just happened to see in the New York Times a blind ad for a game editor. Didn't say who it was for. It didn't say what a game editor was going to do, but I said, "Oh, I like games. I play games." So I applied. Got the interview. Went into Manhattan to meet with the team over at West End, and they hired me initially as an editor. Um, but very quickly, I got to start writing stuff. In addition to editing and developing, I did some Ghostbusters and Paranoia work, the role-playing games they had at the time, a bunch of board games. And then we got the Star Wars license. Initially, I wasn't on the Star Wars team. I was the new kid on the block, and they needed somebody to work on the other stuff. So I was going to do that while the more experienced members of the team took on Star Wars. Um, but that didn't last very long. The first time I got pulled in was when Eric Goldberg, who was in charge of things at the time, well, my cat's going to try to sit on the laptop. Don't do that. He came into my office and showed me an ad that Greg Kostikian had written for the new upcoming Star Wars game and asked my opinion. And I said that this would be a fine Star Trek ad, but it wasn't really a Star Wars ad, and because we had just done a Star Trek game as well. It didn't have the whoosh that I felt Star Wars that made Star Wars Star Wars. And he took that back to Greg, and a couple of hours later, Greg came in and tossed a new piece of copy on my desk and said, "What do you think of that?" And I said, "Oh, that's much better. Good job." And then people started running into deadline issues. We had a very little time to turn around these products. We got the license, or at least I knew about the license late in '86, and we were going to release them late in '87 we wanted to get them out before the end of the 10th year anniversary. So the role-playing game was the first one. Paul Murphy was the primary editor, but he needed some help. So I came in and I edited and developed among other things, the adventure section, the Rebel Breakout adventure that's in that book. And that's where I actually introduced the Imperial Security Bureau that we also saw in Andor. That first appeared there because I needed a bad guy that wasn't Darth Vader or a stormtrooper. So at that time, I was just working on the deadline. Yes, I love Star Wars. This was a great opportunity, but I had to get the products done. Then Curtis Smith, who was writing the source book, again, he was also managing the creative department at the time. And between all of that, he was running behind. So he brought me on to help him finish that. And basically, I wrote most of the product. He'd gotten about a sixth of it done, and I needed to fill out the rest of it and put it all together. I think I really started to get a sense of what we were doing when we went to visit Skywalker Ranch for the first time, which was kind of a surreal experience. And we were in the warehouse where they had all the props. And but even then, we had no illusions that we were adding to the mythology. They were very upfront with us. And the story that they used to tell me was, you're all playing in George's driveway. And George's got this big truck, which is the next set of movies. And when those come starting to roll out of the driveway, they're going to run over all your toys. And in some ways that happened, but luckily a lot of my toys wound up getting thrown in the back of the truck. So that was lucky.
Yeah, because like the ISB, recently Sanctuary, the Bad Batch novel came out. And
Mm.
that's like a huge part of that book. It's like a couple of the main characters and the main villains are, part of the security bureau. And like it's things like that where you look back and you're like, I did that. Um and now it's like it's part of like the building blocks of what Star Wars has become. Because, you may have first kind of like come up with this thing or defined this thing, named this thing, written it down, when you were doing this work so early on, but it's has become something that now someone else, all these years later, can pull from and use in their own stuff. And I think like that's such an interesting way that the Star Wars universe has literally expanded, is like more and more material is added that more people can use. And like even with the, establishment of the new canon and the EU becoming legends, like there's so much that has still carried over. And authors, especially storytellers who were fans and read so many of those books, make an active effort to take references and things and names and bring them over into their new stories. And I think that's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, it started with, in a lot of ways, I think they used West End as an experiment because at
Mm,
the time, everyone thought that the Star Wars license was a dead license until
yeah.
another set of movies came out. But we showed there was life in the property, and that led to the new comics license with Dark Horse. That led to the new novels license, and they started giving our books to them as reference material.
Yeah.
And they said, you know, while this stuff's not official, we'd like you to use it. And, so everybody's using the same terminology. And that's kind of how it began. And then later, when Disney took over and we got that press release from Kathleen Kennedy about, we're going to change the EU into Legends, but
Mm,
that doesn't mean it's gone. We're going to keep some of it and take what we can.
yeah.
And she specifically mentioned stuff from the role-playing game in
Mm,
that press release. So, I think just because of the way we designed it and the way you do a role-playing game, it became foundational.
yeah.
And that foundation turned out to be pretty solid, so they keep using it.
Yeah. Because now, if you're someone lucky enough to get to work on a Star Wars thing, you use all the reference books that Star Wars has made. You use, the most updated version of whatever it is. Like that's what storytellers are using to, literally reference things and build out more stories from things that exist. And it's, largely because that's kind of what they did with the things that you worked on. And like I can't imagine what it was like to like be told that like Timothy Zahn was looking at those books and, like using them as, references for like what he was going to turn into the Heir to the Empire trilogy, because like that in itself is so foundational to what Star Wars publishing has become since then. And I think it's like something that really stood out to me when I was reading through your book is like how so many of like the seemingly small things that you wrote or worked on just continued to be so foundational, and like you didn't mean for that to happen, but it's very cool that it did.
We were fans trying to make the best we could for the property that we loved.
Yeah.
And I think we were lucky enough that that actually came out in the product.
Mm,
And I think that resonated with so many fans. You look at Rebels or Mandalorian, and those shows play like an RPG
mm,
product, right?
yeah.
There's a group of characters going on adventures together. Um, um, and a lot of that's because a lot of those guys or people, a lot of those people worked or played with that game when they were younger.
Yeah.
And now they're in position, from Stranger Things on, there are people who used to be um, just fans who are now actually making the stuff that new fans are enjoying. And that's exciting. Yeah. We'll sit there on the couch watching the newest episode of whatever, and I'll say, "Oh, that's one of mine," and my wife will giggle because no royalties, but at least they're still using my stuff, and that's nice.
It's so cool though, because like it lives on.
Mhm.
Um, it lives on. I mean, like it would be nice if you got paid for it, but we're writers, we're editors, we do our best.
I got paid at the time,
You
right?
did.
So
You
all good.
did.
But
And
I
I
wrote the book because I wanted at least the knowledge of how where that came from to be out there somewhere.
yes. Yeah. And like I'm so glad that you did. Because I've worked on a lot of like in working on different fan sites and things. I've dug into a lot of like the history of Star Wars overall, Star Wars publishing, and I'd heard about the work that West End Games had done, but I didn't know a ton about it because it was before my time. And I haven't gotten around to everything. Like again, I'm just one human, and there's so much time, only so
Sure.
much time. But to be able to read your story really, really like step by step of like how all of this happened was very cool for someone like me. And I think anyone who wants to know more about like how foundational these source books and the role-playing material was to what Star Wars publishing and Star Wars overall has really kind of become in so many of the details, should definitely read it. And it's just a fun read in general because one of my favorite things, and it's happening more and more because as you mentioned, um, many people who were Star Wars fans in the beginning are now all grown up and have jobs and maybe get to write um, some Star Wars things. I think it's so cool when someone who is a fan gets to have this professional experience of like, oh, I'm still a fan. Of course I am. You can't really work on anything Star Wars officially or unofficially and not be a fan. Like that's kind of just kind of the magic behind it. Like that is kind of like the driving force behind the work. But I think it's very cool when a fan gets to do real Star Wars things because it kind of comes full circle. Like you had this journey of I liked Star Wars when it came out. Maybe I even loved it. But now I'm writing Star Wars things and I'm getting paid for it. It's very cool.
And I try to do that with everything I work on, whether it's Star Wars or D&D or Elder Scrolls Online. I think you have to get into a mindset where you appreciate and love the property to do your best work.
Yeah, exactly. Your love for the thing comes through in the work that you do. And I think that is so important for a fan reading it or consuming it. And that's the case with a show, with a movie, with a comic, whatever it might be. Um, like the love that a writer pours into a thing should come through in the final product. And it so often does. And it makes it so much more enjoyable because I'll watch The Mandalorian and I can tell, like, oh, everyone who made this just loves Star Wars so much. And it might be fun, it might be silly, it might be a little more serious. It doesn't matter. You can tell, oh, those behind the scenes in the credits loved this thing so much that they got to make it. And that makes it so much better.
And there's room for that because when we did the Star Wars stuff, we did adventures. We did an adventure that was more horror oriented
Mm,
called Other Space. We did an adventure that was a little more lighthearted, um, as well as the basic space opera adventures, right? So we showed that there was a range of stories you could tell in
mm,
Star Wars, and I think that they're carrying that on today with the different tones of the different shows.
yeah. Oh, for sure. And I love that. Both because I love a little bit of everything. I would get tired of it, I think, if it was the same thing over and over. I mean, Star Wars is always going to have its core themes,
Mhm.
but it can be horror. It can be really whatever the creator wants it to be. You have like something like Skeleton Crew, and then you have something like Andor. Very different tones, very different shows. But the heart of Star Wars is still there. And I think back when the original trilogy ended and there was this gap of time where there wasn't really any new Star Wars. Like you mentioned in your book, there are some things, um, but not a lot. And like to have this opportunity to kind of showcase, like, oh, Star Wars can really be whatever you at home want it to be. Um, And I think that's such an important message. And I mean, it was then and it still is now, is you can sit and you can watch the movies, you can read the books, but like, when I was a kid and like we had like our like plastic lightsabers and like we were just making up stories, like Star Wars could be whatever we wanted it to be. And I think like as adults we kind of forget that sometimes, but it still is. It's made for kids, but like it's also for everyone. And there the most important thing about it is that we're finding as much joy in it as we can.
Sure.
Um, I'd love to know more about, okay, so you kind of went on this journey of like, and we talked about it already. You were a Star Wars fan. You got to kind of come in and work on Star Wars things, and that was very cool. And at this point, you've kind of have stepped back from that, and you're kind of just living, living your life as a Star Wars fan again. What is that like? To finally be able to sit back a little bit and maybe like enjoy things a little more. You talked about Rebels, and that made me so happy because I love Star Wars Rebels so much. It's probably like one of my favorite Star Wars things um, on the screen. And you got to kind of just sit there and watch it as a fan. What was that like?
I'm an avid consumer of all things within the genres that, either I work on or I love.
Yeah.
And uh, one of the hardest parts of working on Star Wars originally, not the first time, but the second time when I was with Wizards of the Coast and we did the
Mm.
D20 version of the game, that was when the prequels were coming out. And we were we were privy to secrets and things that the fans was exciting as a fan, but it was also um, disappointing as a fan because when I got to see the movie, some of the magic was gone because I already knew
Mm.
what was coming.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's nice. You're always going to miss working on. I miss working on Star Wars,
Mm.
but it's nice to be able to sit there and watch those new um, shows or movies or the comics or the novels uh, and absorbing them again as a fan, enjoying them for the first time as opposed to, oh, I got to see this from the ground up, but then
Mhm.
also seeing where they still pulled something from something we made 30 years ago, right? And
Yes.
that's always exciting to me. And then watching how they develop, like you said, that some of them will just take a name that I mentioned without any information and turned it into something new and exciting, and that's great. And others have built on things like the background of the Twi'leks and building on that. And I love to see where that goes.
Mm.
And that's been true since the expanded universe started and now on into the new Disney era, which in some ways they're even digging into that even more because it's a period, I assumed at some point maybe my words would show up on a toy or in a book, but to hear them said on a TV show or a movie, that's almost surreal.
Yeah. Oh, it's so cool. It must be a really amazing experience. So through a lot of the work that you've done, you've been able to kind of write definitions for different Star Wars terms. You've maybe named certain things. Um, you've done a lot of that work, and through that, you've interacted with just a lot of different Star Wars. There's a reason that they, would come to you for some Star Wars knowledge because, like the more you work on it, the more you just like you have a lot of knowledge just stuck up here. It's probably still up there. Um, I want to know of all of the Star Wars things that you've kind of like explored through your work and otherwise, what is your favorite thing in Star Wars? Um, it could be like a ship, an object, a character. Like I'm very curious about like, is there one thing that kind of stands out to you as like this is my thing. I love this so much.
So probably, I certainly lean toward the alien
Mm.
species names um, that I came up with. because as I was writing the original source book, I would tell them hammerhead is not a species name, it's an insult. Squid face is an insult, right? Let me give them real names to go along with the backgrounds that we're developing. And it took a little convincing, but eventually they said, yes, go ahead. This looks good. Keep going. And just because it's so fresh in the mind with Andor, I needed a villain, so I made up the Imperial Security Bureau, and suddenly it's the center of the whole second season of the show. And that's and how they took it from that one thing I made for an adventure that then Greg Gordon and I developed in the Imperial source book, and then taking it to the next step with Andor is just we never expected anything like that when we were making those books.
It's life just works out that way sometimes. Like you get into doing something and you're like, oh, this is cool, but I don't think it's going to lead to anything exciting. I mean, like you were at your day job, like you were just working. But all of this happened, and one of the many great things about your book is you were able to kind of look back on all that and kind of like really just document, like, this is, where it started, this is how it happened, and this is kind of like how it's literally shaped the galaxy as it is. I'm so glad that not only that you wrote this book, kind of like going through everything, for those of us who didn't know, or for those of us who did know, a nice refresher, a nice like compact, like this is the history, from my certain point of view. But also I'm so glad that you have done all of the work that you've done. And like, you may not be working on Star Wars now, but you've contributed so much to what it has become. And I'm so glad for that. And I'm so grateful that you agreed to come here and talk to me about it a little bit, because, I'm just me. I just like Star Wars, but you've interacted with it in such interesting ways. And I want anyone who kind of missed this book like I did when it came out to pick up a copy and read it and really just dig into the fascinating history of how all of this happened. So thank you so much for this conversation and for just everything. You're amazing.
Well, thank you. It's been a fun. Looking back, I've done a bunch of stuff, and it's fun to you never realize what you're doing as you're doing it, as you said, and to look back and see what has become of all of that stuff is just it's very gratifying. So Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if anybody does want to find the book, it's available on DriveThruRPG, and there's a link on my website at billslavicsek.com.
Amazing. Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack at Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.